Welcome to Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant podcast. These are the stories of those who have received, given, and who are waiting for the gift of life, organ transplantation. Now here's your host and heart and kidney recipient, BJ Odom.
Welcome to the Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant podcast, where we explore the extraordinary world of organ transplantation. Each week we share inspiring stories and introduce you to remarkable individuals sharing their own transplant stories. Be sure to support the podcast by leaving a 5-star review and subscribing on your preferred podcast platform. Have a transplant story yourself you'd like to share? Comments about the podcast? Let us hear from you at giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to like us on Facebook, as we are at the Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. This is BJ Odom, the guy with more parts than a chicken nugget. That's my new memoir packed with laughs, heart, and the unbelievable true story of survival that you've heard me talk about right here on the Gift of Life Podcast. Get your copy today. More parts than a chicken nugget, available on Amazon. As we welcome you to episode 100. When we started this show, the goal was simple: share real stories from people whose lives were changed by the miracle of organ donation. 100 episodes later, these stories continue to remind us how powerful hope, faith, and second chances can be. Today's guest, Mike Duncan from Bloomington, Indiana, knows that second chance firsthand. His liver transplant journey took him from the very edge. But thanks to organ donation, he's here today, living life to the fullest. And the story is incredible. We'll get started talking with Mike Duncan. That is coming up next. Mike, I want to welcome you to the podcast today. And as always, we like to get started by you telling us just a little bit about yourself.
Well, good morning. My name is Mike Duncan. I am from Bloomington, Indiana. I am originally from a small town just south of here called Olytic. I think you said you might have some ties to Indiana as well. And so, yes, I live in Bloomington, been here since middle school. It's a great college town. You might have heard we won the national championship in football this year.
I didn't hear anything at all about that. How could that have slipped my mind?
Well, I was going to say, you're living in Florida, but you didn't hear anything about the championship game.
No,
right?
Believe me, I was watching. I like you said previously, I am an Indiana boy. I was watching, I was screaming, and I was a very happy boy, just like you probably.
Yeah, it was an amazing season, and the town went wild. So, so I've been here since middle school. I work full time. I've worked in the title insurance business since actually when I was a senior in high school. I went to high school in the morning, and I worked at a title company in the afternoon. They hired me full time after that. And I'm a person that if I find something I like, I don't change it. I mean, that's in many people will tell you, and pretty much anything, whether it's clothes or anything else, your house, your job. If it works, let's just keep doing it. And that's what I've done. So I've been in the business probably 40 some years this year. So that's a little bit about my background.
Cool. Well, we have you on the show because you had a liver transplant, and that's what this show is all about. And as I always tell everybody, you always have a beginning of your story and you always have an ending. Thank God neither one of us have our ending yet. So let's start from the beginning.
Yes. Okay. Well, my story kind of begins early in 2016. In 2016, in February, my partner and I, Jeff, we were wanting to get away from the Indiana winter. So we were headed to Florida. And we went to down around the Tampa area, and we were there for 2 weeks. But I noticed when I was down there that my urine was getting really dark. And I thought, maybe it's just, something's going on. It's, I got an infection or something, and didn't have any pain. So we just continued. But then later in that same trip, we were in the car, and Jeff said, "Look at me." And I looked over, and he's like, "Your eyes look a little yellow." And I And that kind of scared me. And I thought, well, between the two. And so finished the trip, came back, was working. I started to notice my lower legs began to swell, and they were getting really swollen. My stomach began to swell. A couple of people, friends say, your eyes are looking yellow. So that really got me scared. But at the time, I was afraid because, number one, I did like to drink my beer, and I thought, I'm wondering if that's what it could be, is my liver. And but I didn't want to face it, and I didn't want to go to the doctor because I was afraid of what I would hear. So I kept putting it off. And if I did have to go to the doctor and they would want to do labs, I'd say, well, I've had breakfast this morning. They'll say, oh, we'll do it next time then. So I just kept kicking the can down the road. Things kept getting worse, to the point where then finally I had to go in because they said, we're not going to renew any of your medicines if we don't do labs. Well, so did labs, and of course it came back, not good at all. So the doctor at that point said, I want you to go to the hospital right now. I'm sending you over to the hospital. And I said, well, what happens if I clean up my diet, don't drink anymore, and I don't want to go to the hospital. And she said, well, we'll give it a couple of weeks. But she said, I really would feel more comfortable if you're in the hospital. Anyway, so I did right then, right? I mean, that put the fear of God in me, scared me, no more drinking, and tried to eat better, cut out salt, all of this. And it didn't get any better. So I went to see a specialist, and the specialist said, I think it's reversible. If you really, continue what you're doing, I think that the damage is not so that it can't, your liver can, in certain cases, regenerate itself, and you should be all right. So we tried that for a year. And for a while, it held its own. And we thought, maybe it's going to kick in and take off. But then after a little while, the numbers started going south. So at that point, I was referred to Indianapolis to a doctor up there. And I actually went in just for an appointment, but I wasn't feeling well. And they did some tests, and he's like, you've got infection. We're going to put you in the hospital until you get the infection cleared up. And I said, okay. He said, probably about 3 days. All right. So I go into the hospital, and that was just, by now we're up to like mid-June of 17.
Okay.
And so at that point, I go in thinking I'm going in for 3 days to get this infection cleared up. And I didn't come back home till September. So, I mean, I was up there for 3 months. Things, just went south from there. And so they kept doing, different tests. And at that point, they said, you're going to have a transplant. And scared to death, but I thought, all right, we'll do this. And then, things just kept getting darker and darker. It seemed like just because if your liver's not working properly, it's not filtering your blood well, you get high levels of ammonia that build up in your blood, which causes you don't think clearly. You can have, which I did, hallucinations. You think that you're seeing things or doing things, or people are saying stuff that it's not really happening. So all that started happening. There would be good days, and some days I would be really clear. And then other days, I wouldn't know, there would be, I would think that I was in another county, or I was down at the lake, or I was, you name it. I took more trips and never left the room.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, they got me. They said, well, you've got to get approved to be on the list. So part of that is you really do have to have all kinds of different health screenings that you wouldn't necessarily, think about. You have to have, a cardiac check. You have to have an upper GI to check your esophagus. You have to have a colonoscopy, even down to you have to see a dentist. I mean, even in the hospital, I went to a dentist in the hospital to have a checkup. Everything has to be looking really good to get approved. And so we were able to do that. And then you have to jump through the insurance hoop, to get the insurance to approve you for it. So I started doing all of the testing. And finally, on July the 4th of that year, my insurance approved and I was put on the list. So going forward from that, at some point, it seemed like it was like 10 days later, they said we have a liver. And so we got all ready to go. I was excited and scared at the same time. And then at the last minute, they came in and said, they determined that the liver wasn't viable. So that was, and which I guess, there's a lot of people that get put on the transplant and they tell you they have an organ for you. And sometimes, there's a lot of people that it doesn't go on the first time like this. For some reason or another, they determined it's either not a great match or the organ itself isn't good enough to warrant the surgery.
Now, so, I'm going to ask a question here, because I think a lot of people would know this.
Stop me anytime. I'm just rambling off. So
no, you're doing a great job. But the only thing that I get curious about, because luckily I've had a heart and a kidney, and I remember both of those calls, but never did I get a false alarm. Thank goodness. But how do you handle that? Or how was that feeling that day when you found out we have a liver, and then hours later they tell you it's not viable, it's not going to be your match?
Right. And it's really, really rough because at that point, by the time you get that high on the, because you are placed on the list according to how sick you are.
Yeah.
Right. So to have been, got an offer in 10 days, I knew that I was high on the list. And I also knew that I was very sick and wondering how much longer I could hold on. So, but yeah, when they told me that, I was devastated, and my heart just sank. And because at this point, I'm not feeling good. I'm in a lot of pain, and but I thought, this is going to be the answer. I mean, I'm going to get through the surgery and start feeling better. Yeah, after that, but, my partner, Jeff, he was, caregivers are amazing. I mean, he was there the whole time, and he just said to me, look at it this way. It wasn't for you. It wasn't good enough. And how lucky are we that, that we found that out early, and that it wasn't something that, that they might have gone ahead and transplanted, and then you had, it failed.
Smart man.
Well, yeah. And so that kind of eased it. And it's like, well, yeah, that's right. And so we went with that. So moving on, I continued to get worse. And by this time, like I said, I was feeling pretty, had a lot of pain. I was out of it a lot of days. And, so at that point I said, I can't do it anymore. And I started giving up. And I said, and Jeff kept saying, we're almost there. We're almost there. And I remember saying, I know you keep saying that, but I can't do it anymore. And I'm tired and it hurts. And so at that point, he reached out to family and friends and said, call Mike, tell him, words of encouragement. He's giving up, you got to help. So the phone started ringing, and he was holding the phone up to me, and all these people saying, you gotta. And so anyway, that went on for a few days. And then on July the 25th, so this is 3 weeks to the day I was listed, they said we have a liver. So by this time I'm in and out of it a lot. And I remember when they were getting me ready for surgery. Even then, at that point, it became really real, getting ready to be wheeled out of the room. And I remember saying, I can't do it. I've got other things I got to do. We'll have to wait and do it another time. But this is how out of my head I was. And I said, I need to get back to work. I've got things I got to do. And they're like, oh no, they can take care of that. And I'm like, no, I've got to get back to work. I got to Anyway, regardless, we went and they did it. I woke up after it's over and I couldn't remember any of that. I didn't even know it had happened. And Jeff said, "Aren't you glad that's over?" And I'm like, "It's over?" And he's like, "Yeah, you had your surgery." And I was like, "Oh my God, that's great." Because I was still thinking it hadn't happened, being in and out of it so much.
Now I hear this from a lot of, and it must be the liver, because we talk to people here that has had all sorts of organs transplanted, and it seems like the organ population are the people that by the time they got their organ, they were pretty well out of it, and the brain fog, what they call it, lasts for weeks and weeks after. How long, or do you still have a little bit of brain fog?
Some people might argue, but I will say I'm clear now. But it is, and I think it's with the liver. It's just like I said. It filters your blood, and that ammonia level gets so high that it just takes you out of reality. But it wasn't long after that because the liver, they were really happy with the numbers right off the bat, and the bilirubin levels started coming down quick, and the eyes were white and everything was looking great for about 3 days. And then it went into rejection. And so, they just came in and said, "You're in rejection." Well, to me, that meant, you're going to die. I didn't realize that rejection is common, and rejection can, in most cases, can be reversed with tweaking some kind of medicine or a procedure or something that it just needs an adjustment to get you back on schedule. So that's what they did. They adjusted some meds and stuff and then came out of rejection. And so that was good. But at this point then, I wasn't eating. I didn't want to eat. The thought of eating made me very sick. And they said, "You're going to have to eat because you're losing all this weight." And by this time, by laying in the hospital for almost 2 months, my muscle tone was gone. I couldn't sit up on my own. I couldn't hold my hands up, let alone stand or walk. I mean, it was just gone. So they said, "You've got to eat." And I just couldn't do it. So finally they said, "Well, then we're going to put a feeding tube in." And they did. And it was one that, went down my nose into my stomach. And then the medicine started messing with me to where I was again going in and out of having, the concept of what was really happening. And then I started getting tremors, which I think a lot of people do with the immunosuppressant drug. Yeah. And so my hands were shaking really bad, or I would just have this thing where you just jump real sudden. It's like, you ever have a dream where all of a sudden you're falling and you wake up and you jump real? It was like that, only I was awake and you just jerk all of a sudden. But my hands were shaking and I kept trying to get that tube out of my nose. And they kept saying, "You've got to leave that alone." And so they'd say that and they'd leave, and I kept trying to get it out. And Jeff told them one night, he's like, "You've got to do something because he's going to get that tube out. He's going to pull it out." And they said, "He can't pull that out. We've got it." Somehow they go up and wrap around inside your nose and tie it off so that it's looped, that you can't get it out. And he's like, "I'm telling you." Well, the next morning when he came in, I didn't have a feeding tube. Somehow I got it out. Overnight. And they didn't know how I did it.
Houdini here.
I still don't know. So they put it back in. And he's like, "You better make sure that he won't." And they're like, "He can't get it out. We've got it in there really good." So, well, I did it again. I got it back out, and I do not know how I did it. But when I do remember the second time when I did it, I thought I must have started thinking clearly, because at that point I thought, I'm going to be in trouble. I better put it back in. So I started trying to fish it through my nose and back. I mean, just made things worse. So then they said, they took me down to surgery and they put it in my abdomen, and they said they weren't putting it in my nose. And in order to make sure I wouldn't take it out of my abdomen, they wrapped my hands in these huge mittens and taped them. So I couldn't use my fingers anymore because they were afraid I was going to pull it out. So
now, do you remember, were you trying to get it out because it was uncomfortable, or were you trying to get it out because you were in a bad place and thought maybe you were going to die? Like, let's just get it over with. Or do you
no, I don't remember.
Or do you remember?
I do not remember that. I think I do remember that it bothered me a lot. It was irritating, and I didn't want it in there. And they kept saying, "You've got to have it because you're not." If you, they'd say, "Well, if you start eating, we can take it out." And but I didn't want anything. They brought me everything. I mean, they brought me, donuts from Bloomington. That was my favorite donut shop. They brought my mom's deviled eggs, her recipe, which I absolutely loved. And they tried everything to get me to eat. The head of the kitchen came up to my room and said, "What can I make you that you will eat? I will make you anything." And I said, I can't, I don't want anything. The appetite was gone. And so I think it was irritating to be in there. So I think that's why I wanted it out so bad. But, so they put it in my stomach and it stayed there. And, so that's how they got me nourishment. And, so then they started, things started looking better. I went to, they released me, but like I said, but with my muscle tone and not being able to do anything for myself, I went to a place also in Indianapolis called the Rehabilitation Hospital of Indianapolis, or Indiana. And they were great, and worked with me, to take me down to exercise to try to get you to do all this thing. And at that point, I was so weak. And I said, "I can't do it." And they said, "Well, you've got to do it. Your insurance isn't going to pay to keep you here if we don't show them that you're making effort to move along." And I said, "I'm so weak, I can't." And so I told them one morning, I said, "I've just resigned to myself that I've had my transplant. I'm going to live. Life is great. And if I have to use a wheelchair the rest of my life, that's fine. I'll do that. I'll get a van that has a lift. I'll go to work. And I'm alive, and that's fine. I don't have to." And they said, "You can do better. You can do this." And so with, again, encouragement of family and friends, I kept trying, and then it started getting easier. It started happening. And I'd take a few steps and, they'd be behind me with the wheelchair, sit down, rest, exhausted. But yeah, you just work your way up, until you got to that point where they felt like, okay, you could go home with the help of, some family, and they had physical therapy still come to the house once I got home. Still had my feeding tube, still wasn't eating. And so that's what it was. We went home, continued to work with that. I could eat a little bit, but every night when I went to bed, I was hooked up to a machine, and they'd put this liquid nourishment in these IV bags that would hang by the bed. And I would be fed overnight while I slept. And then when I got up in the morning, I'd unhook and go on.
So
but it was a long run.
I was going to say, how long was it before you started, I guess, I know it's a new normal after a transplant, but when you started really feeling normal?
It took a while. I mean, so I got home in mid-September. So it had been 3 months between the hospital and the rehab. And it was mid-September. Like I said, some of the therapists came to the house for a while. And then January 2nd, I went back to work for part-time. I'd go in for a few hours and, just try to each day stay a little bit longer. And until I worked up to full-time. I'm still with the same company, and awesome people. They worked with me and kept my job, and were very, very supportive through the whole process. So, but I would say it was, probably not until that summer that I felt like I was back to, I was working all day and wasn't extremely exhausted when I came home. So it took a while. And then after that, moving on a little bit further, it was in the following, a year, the next year, I decided, you know what, I don't ever want to be that weak or tired again. So I started looking into like a trainer to work out and try to get some extra strength. And so I found a place and worked with a trainer for a little while, and that went really well. And then I thought, I'm going to take it to the next level. So then I hired a trainer that was more into bodybuilding, and not that I'm a bodybuilder, but so I worked out with him for a few years, and now I go, I'm on my own, but I get up my alarm is set for 4:45 in the morning. I get up and get ready. I go to the gym before I go to the office every day, even on Saturday and Sunday. And that's my favorite hour and a half of the day. It's that time there. And I was never that person before. Before that, I would was sitting on the couch, eating and watching TV.
Yeah, see, I envy you now. I wish I would do that more.
I think it scared me so much to be so weak, and that's what started it. And then once I got into it, I started to enjoy it. And now, I really look forward to it. And so I just continued to do that. And that's kind of where we are today.
So what is that? That's been, you got your transplant in 2017, right?
In 17. Yeah. So this July will be 9 years.
Congratulations to you, young man.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's been a ride, and it's, when I first started getting sick, I thought the last thing I want to do is have a transplant. And then it's funny how then when you get so sick, the thing you pray for the most is that that you can get a transplant. And life after that, at least for me, and I think it can be for most, is, it's better than it was before. I'm certainly in better shape. I certainly feel better. I eat better. I take better care of myself. So yeah, I think that was part of what scared me so much about it, was the unknown. And now knowing what it's like, if I'd have known this, I don't think it would have scared me as much as going through the whole procedure. So I had great doctors. I had a wonderful nursing staff, had great caregivers, support group, Jeff, everybody involved in it, and my employer. And that makes a big difference. And when you go in, once you get on the transplant list, they say, you have to show them that you have, several things. I mean, not just your physical, but that you do have a support team that's behind you to help you when you get home. They want to know that there's going to be someone there to help when they hand you off from the hospital, because you're going to need some help for a while. So it's very important that you have that. And I was blessed with a great group of people.
I think what scared me the most during the whole transplant orientation, as far as, all the testing and everything, they go, now you need to see a psychiatrist, and we need to have your wife talk to one. And I'm going, oh my God, she's going to tell everybody I'm crazy.
Well, you thought that's the end of that. Yeah. Well, and on my end, in my particular case, since it involved alcohol, even before that, that year when I said we were trying to reverse it to make, thought that it would heal itself, I started seeing a psychologist just because they said, if you do end up needing one, you're going to have to show that you worked on, the alcohol issue, and that you haven't been drinking for that long. So I did for 6 months. I saw a great lady here that worked with me, and so I had that under my belt. So yeah, there's I think, and like you said, I think depending on what organ that you're needing, there's several requirements that you've got, because as we all know, organs are in great demand, and they want to make sure whoever they give that organ to is going to take care of it, and seems to, they don't want to give it to somebody that is not going to, appreciate it and be a good custodian to the organ. So, yeah.
Now, with you saying you were from Bloomington, I've just got to ask you this question. It's just natural. So did you get yours done at the IU Medical Center there in Indianapolis?
I did. It was IU Health, and it's University Hospital up there. But yeah, and we're very lucky just because I think when I looked, they said, they're definitely in the top 10, maybe the top 5 transplant hospitals for liver. And I think kidneys as well. But I know for liver and we were really lucky just mainly because, some people live many hours from their transplant hospital and it's only like 50 minutes up the road for me. So, my follow-ups, I go once a year now, for my annual checkup. And it's just a 50-minute drive north. And so I'm very fortunate with that. And they were wonderful people.
And how are you today? We've talked about your pretty much story up till transplant and after, and now, you're pretty well back to normal. How is life today for you, Mike?
It's great. It is great. Everything, I couldn't really ask for anything more. I'm happy. I feel good. I think as with anybody else, I wish I didn't have to take as many pills a day as I do. But that's what keeps you going. And, I'm blessed. I'm very blessed and I feel wonderful. And, and I would just, say, for anybody that is in a situation where you think that, something might be going on, to get it checked out, be proactive, don't procrastinate like I did. I'm convinced that I could have been in and out and not gone through as much as I did had I addressed it earlier to where I wouldn't have gotten to that point of sickness. I think that early detection is important. Get your, have your physical, get your lab works done, make sure everything's working. And if you suspect something is wrong,
it's probably going wrong.
That is it. Yeah. And it's not going to get any better by waiting. So I've learned that the hard way. So yes, that's what I would encourage people to do.
And it's, as I do this podcast, I hear it more times than I wish I would, that people say, I just kept shoving it off and pushing it off and going, it's all going to get better. It's all going to get better. And sometimes, whether you're pro medicine or even anti-medicine, there are times that you just need to go see a doctor.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it with me was I didn't, I thought, I don't want to take time off work. I didn't want anybody to know I was sick. And by this point, when I was getting to that point, Jeff was like, they know. I mean, you don't look, you can tell between your eyes and, but I was trying to hide it for so long and fight it. And finally, you got to the point where you couldn't hide it or put it off any longer. It's best to take care of that early. When you first think something's wrong, check it out.
All right. Now, have you ever met your donor? Or did you reach out to them, or where are you on that part of the journey?
Yeah, I did. It was about a year after I wrote a letter to the donor. I found out just through, doing a little investigation, a little bit about who it was. And I wrote a letter, but I never heard anything back. And I've thought about, that since more time has passed, about trying again. I thought maybe that was too soon, or maybe, the family didn't feel like addressing it. And I really thought about writing another one. I did reach out. I haven't heard. I think about the donor a lot, as I think a lot of transplant recipients do. It's they're the heroes. I mean, they are the heroes of the story. I mean, I may be carrying on and, have come back and doing great and got through it all, but none of this would be possible without them. So it all starts there.
And it's always tough too. And I sometimes think that I should reach out to my donors again, because I had a heart and a kidney. And it's like, because you can't imagine it as the recipient, because on the worst day of that family's life, basically was the best day of your life.
Right. It's so, it's two extremes, from one extreme to the other. And, yeah, it's, but yeah, without them. And so I've done, a couple of things. I've done, I try to, talk about it when I can. And I did a fundraiser for the rehab hospital that I was in, did interviews for that. And I've done a few social posts for transplant things, but yeah, always willing to do more to spread the word and try to get more people to register to be donors and just bring awareness to it. The more people that hear about it and are aware of it and, hear about people that they know that have been through it. I think, and there was a lot of people, that said, after your story, after seeing you and what it did, I registered, I registered to be a donor. So, there's a lot of good, that continues to come from that.
Well, Mike, I appreciate you for sharing your story. And before we do wrap things up and let you go, anything that maybe we missed or something you've just thought about that you really wanted to lay out to the world, but the podium is now yours, Mike.
No, I think we kind of hit it here at the end. Like I said, again, I would just encourage people to get your checkups and your labs, and especially if something feels off, do that. And don't be afraid. That's what I think kept me from waiting for so long, was to thinking, how scary or awful it could be. And it's like I think I mentioned, life is better now than it was prior to transplant. So yeah, just encourage people to be registered to be an organ donor. You can be a hero. And I appreciate the time to share my story. And thanks for allowing me to be on your show.
Thank you so much, Mike, for sharing your story with us today on the Gift of Life podcast. And be sure to join us each week for a new heartfelt episode. And if you have a transplant story, email us, giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook, and also don't forget to like and share this episode with family and friends. And we would appreciate that 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Reminder, my memoir, More Parts Than a Chicken Nugget, isn't just a medical story. It's a survival story filled with humor, hope, and heart. It'll make you laugh, maybe shed a few tears, and definitely believe in second chances. Get yours now on Amazon. Another podcast you might enjoy is myself and my former radio partner, Bill Stevens. BJ and Bill, the podcast, all on the Podcast Playground Network. We want to thank them for making this podcast possible. Until next time, I'm BJ Odom. Thank you for being part of our journey and reminding us all to appreciate each and every day and to treasure the extraordinary gift of life.